dive into something that's been bugging book lovers for centuries. Why are we still so obsessed with Pride and Prejudice? It's a story about English society from like over 200 years ago. You'd think it'd be like gathering dust on a shelf somewhere.
But it's not. And there's a reason for that. Jane Austen tapped into something timeless, something that goes way beyond the charming country dances and witty banter.
Exactly. And it's not just the romance, although Elizabeth and Darcy are undeniably iconic. There's something deeper going on here.
It's about the things we still struggle with today. Love, relationships, societal pressures, you name it. It's like she's holding up a mirror to human nature, showing us how much we haven't changed, even after all these years.
Okay, so let's start with Elizabeth and Darcy. Their first meeting is a total train wreck. Comes off as arrogant, she thinks he's snobby, not exactly love at first sight.
Right. And this is where Austen's genius shines through. She throws these two flawed characters together, lets them clash and misunderstand each other. It's almost like she's saying, look, real love isn't about instant fireworks. It's about challenging each other, peeling back those layers, and growing because of your differences.
So it's not about finding someone who's perfect, but rather someone who pushes you to be a better version of yourself.
Exactly. And how often do we do that in our own lives? How often do we judge someone based on a first impression, a quick glance, a social media profile? Austen is reminding us to look deeper, to be open to being surprised by people.
It's like those cheesy romantic comedies where the guy and the girl hate each other at first, but then boom, they realize they're soulmates.
But in Pride and Prejudice, it's not cheesy at all. It's so cleverly done. Austen shows us how these two characters slowly chip away at their preconceived notions and discover the good in each other.
And let's be real, societal pressure was huge back then. Marriage wasn't just about love, it was about economic security, family expectations. A whole lot more complicated than swiping right on a dating app.
Absolutely. The Bennet family's situation highlights that perfectly. Mrs. Bennet is practically desperate to marry off her daughters, and for good reason. Their financial future depends on it.
So it's not just about finding love, it's about finding security, stability. It all ties into the complex dynamics of that era.
And that pressure, that feeling of should versus want, that resonates with us today, doesn't it? Think about the choices we make in our own lives. Do we ever feel pressured to choose a career path because it's practical, even if it doesn't make our hearts sing?
Totally. And you can see that same struggle in Charlotte Lucas, Elizabeth's friend, who chooses to marry the ridiculous Mr. Collins for purely practical reasons. It's heartbreaking, but also super relatable.
Right. And that's another example of Austen's brilliance. She doesn't shy away from showing us the hard choices people had to make, especially women. And she does it in a way that makes us think, what would I do in that situation?
She really had a knack for exposing the absurdity of society's obsession with class. Lady Catherine de Bourgh, talk about snobbery personified.
Oh, she's the queen of it. Lady Catherine embodies that ridiculous sense of entitlement that comes with inherited wealth and status. It's almost comical how she looks down on anyone who isn't part of her elite circle.
But what's crazy is that even Elizabeth, independent and strong-willed as she is, faces prejudice because of her family's lower social standing.
Yes. It shows that no matter how intelligent or capable you are, society can still put you in a box based on your background, your family, your income. And that's something we're still grappling with today, right?
Totally. It makes you think about how we still judge people based on external factors, instead of getting to know them as individuals. And honestly, Austen was savage about it. She uses humor to expose just how ridiculous those judgments are.
And she does it in a way that makes us laugh at ourselves, too. We see those same prejudices in our own lives, maybe in more subtle ways, and it makes us question those assumptions.
And speaking of challenging assumptions, Austen was pretty revolutionary in how she portrayed women. Okay, maybe Pride and Prejudice isn't a feminist manifesto, but it definitely pushes boundaries.
It's subtle, but it's there. The limited options women had back then, it's eye-opening. Marriage wasn't just about love. It was often the only way to secure a future.
That's a far cry from how we think about relationships today, right?
And that's why it's so important to remember the context. But even within those limitations, Austen gives us a character like Elizabeth, who dares to defy expectations.
She rejects two WO marriage proposals, one from Mr. Collins, which, let's be honest, was a disaster waiting to happen, and another from Darcy himself. Talk about standing up for what you believe in.
Exactly. Elizabeth chooses to define her own worth, her own happiness, instead of bowing to societal pressure. In that sense, she's incredibly modern, a role model for anyone who's ever felt pressured to make a choice they didn't believe in.
And that theme of defying expectations, it's so powerful even today. We're still fighting for equality, for the right to choose our own paths, to define our own success.
And Elizabeth's story reminds us that it's a fight worth having, even if it means going against the grain.
Absolutely. But it's not just about social commentary, right? Pride and Prejudice is also about the characters' individual journeys of growth. It's about recognizing your flaws and learning from your mistakes.
And that's where the real magic of the book lies. It's not a fairy tale. It's a story about real people with real flaws who have to work to become better versions of themselves. Darcy has to confront his pride. Elizabeth has to let go of her prejudices.
And it's through those struggles that they ultimately find each other, right?
Exactly. And isn't that what we all want? To find someone who challenges us, who helps us grow, who loves us for who we are, flaws and all.
It makes you wonder if maybe, just maybe, there's a little bit of Darcy and Elizabeth in all of us.
Yeah, it really does. And that's the beauty of Pride and Prejudice. It's not just a story you read, it's a story that stays with you and makes you, question your own assumptions and biases.
Absolutely. I remember the first time I read it.
Yeah.
I was totally caught up in the romance, the will they, won't they tension between Elizabeth and Darcy. But then as I got older, I started to appreciate the deeper layers, the social commentary, the way Austen uses humor to expose the hypocrisy of her time.
And it's so relevant to us today. Even though the world has changed so much, we might not be navigating balls and carriages, but we're still dealing with the same human foibles. Pride, prejudice, the pressure to conform to societal expectations.
Totally. Think about how we present ourselves online. On social media, it's all about crafting the perfect image, showing off the best version of ourselves.
Yeah.
It's almost like a modern-day version of the social hierarchy Austen was writing about.
It's fascinating, isn't it? We're still caught up in appearances, in judging people based on superficial things. And just like in Pride and Prejudice, those judgments can be so misleading. Think about how many times you've been completely wrong about someone after getting to know them better.
Oh, all the time. It makes you realize how important it is to be open-minded, to give people a chance, to look beyond the surface.
And that's one of the most powerful messages of the book. Austen shows us that growth is possible, that even the most prejudiced characters can change, can learn to see the world differently.
It's like that moment when Darcy finally lets go of his pride and admits his feelings for Elizabeth, even though she comes from a family he initially deems beneath him. It's such a powerful moment of transformation.
Exactly. And it's not just Darcy who changes. Elizabeth has to confront her own prejudices too. She realizes that her initial judgments about Darcy were based on incomplete information, on assumptions she made without really knowing him.
It's a reminder that we all have blind spots, that we all make mistakes, and that's okay. What matters is that we're willing to learn from those mistakes and grow.
And that's the beauty of literature, isn't it? It gives us this safe space to explore these complex themes, to see ourselves reflected in the characters, to learn from their triumphs and their failures.
It's like Austen is giving us a roadmap for self-discovery. She's saying, hey, look at these characters, look at their mistakes, look at how they grow. Now take a look at yourself. What are your blind spots? What are your prejudices? How can you be better?
And she does it with such wit and humor that it never feels preachy or heavy-handed. It's just a delightful story that happens to be packed with wisdom and insight.
It's like she's having a conversation with us across centuries about the things that really matter. Love, relationships, self-awareness, the importance of being kind and understanding.
And those themes are just as relevant today as they were back then. In fact, in a world that's becoming increasingly polarized and divided, I think Austen's message of empathy and understanding is more important than ever.
Totally. It's so easy to get caught up in our own bubbles, to surround ourselves with people who think like us, to judge those who are different. But Pride and Prejudice reminds us that there's always more to the story, that everyone has their own complexities and nuances.
And that taking the time to understand those complexities, to bridge those divides, can lead to the most unexpected and rewarding connections.
I mean, who would have thought that Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy, two people from such different worlds, with such different personalities, would end up falling in love?
It's a reminder that love can blossom in the most unexpected places, if we're just willing to let go of our preconceived notions and open our hearts to the possibilities.
Okay, I have a confession to make. Every time I reread Pride and Prejudice, I find myself rooting for Elizabeth and Darcy, even though I know exactly how the story ends.
Oh, me too. It's like their love story is so timeless, so captivating, that it never gets old.
And it makes you wonder, if Pride and Prejudice were written today, how would the story play out? Would Elizabeth and Darcy meet on a dating app? Would their witty banter be reduced to emojis and text messages?
I know. Imagine Darcy sending Elizabeth a carefully crafted sonnet via DM. only to have her reply with a laughing emoji.
It's hilarious to think about, but it also highlights how much our ways of communicating,
Yeah.
of connecting, have changed since Austen's time.
But even with all those changes, I think the core of the story would remain the same. We'd still be drawn to the characters, to their struggles, to their triumphs. We'd still be rooting for them to overcome their differences and find happiness together.
Because deep down, we all want the same things, right? Love, connection, acceptance. And those desires are universal, timeless, regardless of the era we live in.
Exactly. And that's why Pride and Prejudice continues to resonate with readers. Centuries after it was written, it's a story that speaks to the human heart, that reminds us of our shared humanity, and that gives us hope that even in a world filled with challenges, love and understanding can prevail.
So for everyone listening, what part of this deep dive has resonated with you the most? Has it made you think about your own prejudices, your own experiences with love and relationships, or maybe just appreciate the genius of Jane Austen?
We'd love to hear your thoughts. And remember, Pride and Prejudice is a book that can be enjoyed on so many levels. It's a romance, a social commentary, a study of human nature, and so much more.
It's a book that's worth revisiting again and again, each time discovering something new, something that speaks to you in a different way.
And with that, we've come to the end of part 2 of our deep dive into Pride and Prejudice. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll explore the lasting legacy of Austen's work and its impact on literature, film, and culture.
And we're back for like the final part of our deep dives into Pride and Prejudice. We've talked about the characters and the timeless themes and how it all connects to us even centuries later. But there's one thing we haven't touched on yet, the legacy of this book.
It's incredible how Pride and Prejudice has become this cultural phenomenon. We're talking adaptations galore, movies, miniseries, even musicals. It's like the story is constantly being reborn, reinterpreted for each generation.
I mean, who can forget Colin Firth emerging from the lake in that white shirt? Talk about a Darcy for the ages. But it's more than just swoon-worthy moments, right?
Right. Each adaptation brings something new to the table. Some focus on the social satire, some on the romance. Some even set the story in entirely different time periods or cultures. It's a testament to the power of Austen's storytelling, that it can be reimagined in so many ways.
It's like the story is a chameleon, adapting to different times and places, yet always retaining that core essence that makes it so compelling.
And it's not just adaptations. Think about the countless books, movies, and TV shows that have been inspired by Pride and Prejudice. The enemies to lovers trope, the witty banter, the exploration of social class and gender roles. These are all elements that Austen helped popularize.
It's crazy to think that a book written over 200 years ago is still shaping the stories we tell today.
And that's the mark of a true literary masterpiece. It transcends its time and place and speaks to something universal about the human experience.
It's also interesting to see how Pride and Prejudice has been embraced by academics. Scholars are still debating its meaning, analyzing its language, and finding new ways to interpret its themes.
It's like a gift that keeps on giving. There's always something new to discover, some fresh insight to uncover. And that's what keeps the book alive, keeps it relevant even centuries later.
It's amazing how a story about a few families in rural England can spark such endless conversation and debate.
And that's the power of great literature. It invites us into a world that's both familiar and strange, that reflects our own lives, even as it challenges us to see things from a different perspective.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the question we're left with is this: what makes Pride and Prejudice so enduring?
It's hard to pinpoint just one thing. It's the characters, the language, the social commentary, the romance. It all comes together to create a story that's both timeless and timely, that speaks to the heart as well as the mind.
And maybe, just maybe, it's the hope that it offers. The hope that even in a world filled with pride and prejudice, with misunderstandings and social barriers, love can conquer all.
That's a beautiful thought. And it's a thought that's worth holding on to, even as we navigate the complexities of our own lives.
So for everyone listening, we encourage you to pick up Pride and Prejudice again, or for the first time, and see what speaks to you. Let yourself get swept away by the romance, ponder the social commentary, and maybe even imagine how the story would play out in today's world.
And most importantly, let it spark conversations, challenge your assumptions, and remind you of the enduring power of great storytelling.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Pride and Prejudice. We hope you've enjoyed the journey and that it's left you with a renewed appreciation for this timeless classic. Until next time, happy reading.